All right, thank you everyone for joining us today for our 6 pillars of an effective employee experience webinar. I'm going to go over a couple housekeeping items before we hand it over to our presenter. Just so all of you know, we are recording this webinar, so it will be sent within 24 hours. Q&A will follow the presentation. With that said, you can ask questions at any time in the Q&A drop-down in the GoToWebinar panel. Be sure to follow us for other great content, other good webinars on LinkedIn at Akuma. And with that, I'm going to quickly introduce our presenter, Dave Maffey, President of Akuma. You may begin.
Hey, Mike, thanks a lot. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate you taking the time to chat with us on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. This webinar is scheduled for 30 minutes, and I've got a decent bit of content to cover, so I'm going to move at a pretty good clip. I promise not to PowerPoint you to death. There are some customer examples as I go through this that I'll gloss over. Certainly, if you want to learn more about our interactions with those organizations, feel free to follow up with us after the webinar. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and kick right into it. Akuma is a software company, and we call ourselves an employee experience software platform. And fundamentally, we're focused around empowering global enterprises, both at the medium-sized scale and large enterprise scale, to very quickly create very personalized experiences that are focused on every employee and putting those employees in a position where they can interact at every level and fundamentally work smarter, not harder. At the end of the day, Akuma customers are trying to figure out how to drive a more productive, more efficient, and more collaborative workforce. And we'll spend time over the course of the webinar today talking about how Akuma has been able to support that with our better than 4 million daily active users on the platform. One of the big things when you think about what it means to drive an enhanced employee experience, or what it means to increase the engagement that you have with your employees, is fundamentally understanding where you're starting from. Akuma was started on this underlying principle and this premise that employee experience simply hasn't kept pace. And so what we've seen across our customers and across this market is that there are sort of 4 massive gaps that exist and that need to be filled in order to really check the box on driving enhanced productivity and an overall enhanced experience with your employees. Those 4 things that sort of this market's been plagued with are unengaging user experiences, disconnected technology, certainly collaboration hurdles, and overall disengagement across the user base. And these 4 puzzle pieces, as we have up here on the screen, are critical to coming together, because without solving these elements, you cannot drive and create a more effective workforce. Unengaging user experiences means that everything's generic, right? We have employees across our organization, from our C-level of executives down in many cases to our hourly workers, and everything that exists in between. We have employees that are corporate knowledge workers that are sitting in a cubicle. We have employees that are working on the manufacturing floor or in a retail store that are only able to be connected through their individual mobile device. For us, and one of the big powers of solving the problem where employee experience hasn't kept pace, is driving a more personalized and targeted experience so that everyone feels that the engagement in the experience has been built for them. The second thing or problem puzzle that exists here is this concept of disconnected technology. And everyone in this conversation knows that there are tons and tons of different technology systems that exist inside of your corporate ecosystem. And becoming an expert on how all of those tools work is not only a fool's errand, it's almost impossible. One of the big things for us, and there was an analyst that wrote a report a couple of years ago and said that if you give a traditional knowledge working employee more than 4 enterprise cloud user experience interfaces to do their day job with, their productivity plummets. So solving the disconnected technology problem is about single pane of glass. It's about connection and it's about integration. And we'll talk about that today, and bringing all of these disconnected technologies, breaking down those silos and putting us in a position to be successful with one fundamental user experience to your users. Collaboration hurdles also obviously are a massive plague across this problem. And collaboration is the one thing that I would tell you, whether I'm sitting in a room with people from the CIO's office or people from Marcom or people from HR, and I ask them what collaboration means to them, everybody has a different answer. It is the one, and I would argue, one of the most polarizing topics as it relates to what does collaboration mean and how do we sort of harness the power of what collaboration can mean across the enterprise. And we'll talk a little bit today about the concepts of collaboration and the difference between team-based collaboration and entity-based collaboration as a means for driving a more productive workforce. And the last sort of puzzle piece here is around disengaged users. And I spoke at a conference back in September in London. It was the Gartner Digital Workplace Show. And I talked about this sort of growing gap that exists between all of our personal lives and our work lives. And when you think about every single employee, you know, every single business, every single enterprise, your employees have incredibly innovative personal lives. They have smartphones, they have tablets, they can see who's ringing the doorbell and talk to them through their phone, they can change the temperature in their house, they can watch their children at daycare. These are incredibly innovative and powerful technology elements that have been put in the palm of their hand to make their life easier. But for many corporations around the globe, a traditional knowledge working employee shows up to work and that enterprise gives them a 3-year-old Dell laptop and an email address and tells them to go be productive. This innovation gap is big and it is growing bigger every day. And to solve the problem of employee experience not being sort of keeping pace, a big problem and a big part of solving that problem is around breaking those barriers down and minimizing that innovation gap that exists between personal and workplace innovation. For us, when we talk with prospective customers or existing customers about what we sort of call the employee experience journey, the big thing for us is how we get an understanding of what your outsetted goals are, but more importantly, we understand your vision or your North Star. I think one of the problems that we've seen that plagues this market, and we have organizations literally every day that have previously deployed sort of your more quote unquote intranet in a box technologies, and they've realized that those technologies levy significant limitations on them. And they're coming to Akuma and other competitors like us looking for an employee experience platform, a piece of software that will allow them to start down a path and a journey to put them on a path of better engaging their employees and driving that efficient, productive workforce that they're looking for. For Akuma, when we're working with our customers, it's important to understand a couple of different things. The first thing that's critically important is understanding what your outset goal is. I can almost promise you that almost no one on this call has a budget line item in their annual budget that says we need to buy an employee experience platform. Maybe it says we need to focus on employee experience. Maybe it says we need to refresh the intranet or the portal or the employee hub. These are the things that are the outstated goal. But simply meeting the quote unquote table stakes of that goal is not good enough for today's workforce. And especially in a world where unemployment is at an all-time low and finding and retaining good talent is very difficult. So when we take our customers on this employee experience journey, and we're going to talk about the 6 pillars that are a part of this journey, it's not just about understanding your initial goal. It's about understanding how we can extract the vision of where you want to take employee experience inside your organization, what that North Star is and what your roadmap is on going past those sort of table stakes or MVP 1 and constantly iterating and innovating on the experiences you're giving your employee, versus simply deploying an intranet in a box where you inevitably will end up in that sort of intranet in a box black hole that some of the analysts talk about. The sort of fundamental underlying thought process behind the Akuma employee experience platform, and I would argue any employee experience platform, is that it needs to be easy to implement, easy to operate, and easy to manage. You know, we talk to organizations quite literally on a daily basis that have deployed SharePoint, or they've deployed Huddle, or they've deployed Confluence, or they've deployed Jive, or they've deployed some sort of homegrown portal technology. And guess what? It wasn't easy to implement, it hasn't been easy to operate, and no one can manage it. And so these sort of core pillars of how we focus on driving the right experience for our customers is critical, because if it's not easy to implement, operate, and manage, then we've missed the mark on delivering you something that will fundamentally transform the way that you interact with your workforce. And so that brings us to the sort of core 6 pillars that we argue sit underneath the umbrella of a really powerful employee experience platform. The days of thinking about just redoing the intranet or launching a new intranet are actually short-sighted. The intranet is an important part of an overarching employee experience platform, but it is just that, just a part. For us, it's about focusing and working with our constituents on the Marcom side, on the HR side, and on the technology side to fundamentally understand how we hit on each of these 6 pillars to deliver a far superior experience that isn't one and done, but is really just the start of this broader and longer journey. The modern intranet is a critical part of that. How you communicate with your employees is also a critical part. The way that you collaborate and the way that you create, modify, and manage content are critical parts. How you focus on not just delivering a responsive web design site, but focusing on true enterprise native mobility is another part, and having those 5 pillars propped up on an extremely scalable and performant integration layer rounds out the concept of our 6 pillars. And there are a couple of elements, and I'll talk about this later, that are sort of ever present inside of these 6 pillars. Search and identity management are critical elements of the way that you're able to not only deploy this new EXP experience for your employees, but how you are able to actually put the power of these tools in their hands and in the line of work. So you're not fundamentally changing the way they interact with content. You're fundamentally changing the way that they do their job, which I think is the fundamental and underlying purpose of why each of you joined this webinar today. As we think about breaking down each of these pillars, the first one that I want to talk about is the modern intranet. And we often talk about legacy intranets being sort of content graveyards, right? They're one size fits all, they're static, they're not targeted or personalized. You're limited in scope to what that system can do or what it delivers. And going outside of that scope or going outside of what's possible is nearly impossible. And so when you think about how the intranet must play a role, it must be focused on me as an individual. It must also be focused on the business and ensuring that I'm delivering the capabilities to my Marcom users to deliver the right content, the right news, the right information into the palms of the hands of these employees, while also giving each of those employees an individual and personalized productivity window to be able to do their things better. Right? To be able to do their jobs better, to produce more product, to service more customers, to take part in more meetings. This is the critical yin and yang of solving that modern intranet world, which isn't just about news or pages or departments, but it's about the handshake that exists between what the business wants you to consume, understand, and interact with, and what you as an individual employee want to consume, understand, and interact with. The second element or second key point is a communications platform. And when you think about what is most critical with a communications platform, we talk about giving a voice to every single employee. And what that means is that it has to be multi-directional. It has to be operationalized in real time. It has to be multilingual, and it has to be relevant. When you think about delivering the right information to the right user on any device at any time and in any language, you're doing so through the lens of understanding that communications, a communications platform and a communication strategy is not simply about the business communicating with the employees. In fact, we would argue that that is the third sort of place element in this. It is much more important, again, to give that voice to every one of your employees so that they can communicate not just with the business, but also with one another. So understanding how communications fits in with the concept of a modern intranet as a standalone and side-by-side parallel mechanism is critical for the understanding of what we're trying to do. When you think about what that means from a customer perspective, right, you're talking about having to talk to lots of different constituents, and you're talking about having to communicate with lots of different constituents. So whether that is, in my example up on the screen in front of us from our friends at Church's Chicken, those could be corporate workers, they could be manufacturing workers, they could be distributors, or they could be hourly workers at franchisees out in their stores in the market, whether that's in the United States or in the Middle East. And being able to communicate and make churches one corporation versus lots and lots and lots of siloed individual corporations is the difference between having a communication strategy and simply having an intranet portal that people can go to. The third element from a pillars perspective is all about driving collaboration and what that collaboration engine means. And so when you think about collaboration, there are really two different elements that are critical. Number one is team-based collaboration. Our friends at Microsoft have created Microsoft Teams. They also have Yammer. Slack is another team-based collaboration tool that is obviously widely deployed. Team-based collaboration doesn't have a start and an end. It is sort of an ever-present and an ongoing, persistent collaboration where the actual collaboration of this team, in many cases, outlasts the team members themselves. The other side of collaboration, though, and I would argue potentially more important than team-based collaboration, is entity-based collaboration. This is where you're focusing on teamwork and you're focusing on driving a better experience around actually getting work done, making quick work of teamwork, being a pro at process, bringing together lots of different elements, whether it's milestones or timelines or documents or tasks, into a single pane of glass, and being able to do so at global scale. These are critical elements from our perspective on a mechanism to understanding how you sort of toe the collaboration line of having a really strong team collaboration across the business while also being able to be a more productive group of employees to get entity-based collaboration and project management done more effectively. And so when you look across the organizations that are doing these types of things, it's about understanding that for the Red Sox, for example, while team-based collaboration across the organization is critical, the sheer amount of events and promotions and things that the Red Sox and other professional sports teams kick off are critical in the sense of being able to empower their employees to collaborate in small groups to get things done. The fourth pillar that I will talk about is content management. And I will argue that in a world of thinking about things through the lens of a traditional intranet, an enterprise content management system is often left for dead. When you think about building your public-facing website or an extranet or something, content management is the first thing that you think of. But for some reason, over the last 20 years, when people think about building employee-facing experiences, the fact that creating really good content and being able to manage the content experiences is often forgotten. So from our perspective, this is an incredibly critical tool for being able to drive better digital experiences, create content once but distribute to many different places, including the operationalization of content reuse, while also understanding that the way that people do things is through the concept of an app-driven interface. So it is incredibly important in today's day and age when you think about content management and the creation of sustainable and reusable content that it can be done as simply as it is to post to Facebook and Twitter on your mobile device. And doing that in any language and at any time so that you can deliver the right targeted content-based experiences to any employee at any time. The fifth element that we will talk about through the lens of these pillars is enterprise native mobility. This is an important element for Akuma when we talk with our customers about what good looks like for them and how they engage with their workers. More and more, we're working with distributed organizations who have no mechanism to give that voice to their distributed workers or to actually interact with those of their workers who are deskless. The people inside of your organization that make their money and produce quality for your organization with their hands and not necessarily with a laptop. And for us, when you think about delivering a true enterprise native mobile app across both the iOS and Android platforms, you're doing so through the lens of creating the right app for you, not a one-size-fits-all app that is the same regardless of who your organizations are. I've shown you several different customer examples through the first part of this webinar. Each of those organizations are dramatically different. And mobility is not different than the way that you're engaging with these employees. So for us, it's about creating the right enterprise native mobile app for your organization that is branded and cultivated for your enterprise, and not just delivering a responsive website, but putting the power of the mobile phone in your employees' hands with things like push notifications, GPS and camera, and biometric authentication. And the more distributed your user base, the more critical this is, and more important it is for centralized management across all of the content that you're distributing throughout your EXP, regardless of what the device is that it is being consumed on. The last sort of element of these 6 pillars is what we call an integration layer or an enterprise service bus. And for us, you need to be able to integrate without limitation. Many of the intranet in a box providers that are out in the market are really good at integrating with Office 365, which is fantastic and would be perfect if Office 365 was the only technology capability that you had running through your stack. But the reality of it is, we know in medium and large enterprises that there are so many other technologies, whether it's HR technology such as Workday, or self-help and ticketing technologies like ServiceNow, or back office technologies like Oracle and SAP, or Salesforce for CRM, or Kronos for timekeeping. There are so many different enterprise technologies that are out there. And for me to create a 360-degree immersive experience for every employee, I need to be able to seamlessly and flexibly integrate with these different systems and then deliver an experience to every one of my users that allows them to think about doing their tasks, or executing against problems, or creating content, or doing their job more effectively, and not needing to be an expert in Workday or in ServiceNow or in SharePoint or in some other system. So from our perspective, the integration layer is the tunnel to the single pane of glass experience as we focus on driving a more robust and more reactive experience for every employee that's built for them, not necessarily just built for the business. The last thing that I'll touch on when you think about the sort of culmination of these 6 pillars are the 2 important pieces that we have in the middle. Without a really good search strategy and without a really well thought out identity strategy, you cannot create this personalized, immersive, and targeted experience that's going to fundamentally change the way your employees do their job and fundamentally change the interaction that you have with your workforce. Search and information architecture in general are critical, not just through the lens and the mechanism of finding content, but allowing that content to find the right user. And doing so underneath the umbrella of identity management, where for many of our organizations, sure, there's attributes about users in Active Directory or perhaps in an Okta or Ping, but you also have attributes in your HR system like a Workday. You also have attributes potentially in third-party proprietary systems. How do you take all of the disparate attributes that exist about an individual employee or a series of employees at your organization and mash them together so that I can deliver the right experience to that employee or that group of employees, segmenting them not by their division or their department or their geographical location, but segmenting them based on the information that needs to be delivered for them to be a more productive and efficient employee. All of these elements, the 6 pillars, in addition to the way that we manage identity and search, is critical in terms of driving the right experience for every employee. And when you deploy a true EXP, a true employee experience platform, there are certain things you need to be mindful of, most notably security and data management. And so one of the big things for Akuma, and the thing that sets us apart from everyone else in the industry, is that Akuma does not store any of your data, and Akuma is not in and of itself an identity management system. What Akuma really is an incredibly powerful experience wrapper that you put around the experiences you want to deliver and empower your users with, and then a very robust enterprise content management system on the back end that empowers users to create the right experience and deliver it out to every employee so they feel like they're the most important person inside your organization. And everything boils down to ensuring that that focus is critical on that one employee. And whether it's thinking through the lens of driving personalized or transformative experiences, or connected or mobile first experiences, or innovative experiences that allow your employees to do work like they've never done it before, the right deployment of the right EXP platform is what will separate you from where you are today to where you want to go with your entire workforce tomorrow. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, David. We're going to quickly launch a poll. Anyone who's interested in learning more about the Akuma system and how we can help with our platform maximize your employee experience, let us know. We'll leave this up for just about 60 seconds, and then we'll move to the Q&A. With that said, make sure that you're selecting the GoToWebinar questions dropdown and submitting your questions there to all panelists.
While you guys are filling out that poll, you can feel free to grab my email address off the screen in front of you. That's not some secret spam email address that goes into a marketing folder. That is my actual email address. And feel free to reach out with questions or comments, or if you're interested in understanding how Akuma is helping some of the organizations we showcase today, or the thousands of other organizations around the globe that are using our platform.
All right, so we're going to Q&A. So the first question from the audience, from John in the audience, he wants to know, you mentioned easy to manage. To that, that can mean different things to different folks. For each department owner, could they actually manage the system, or is IT really managing it? And how does Akuma do that?
No, John, it's a really good question. I think one of the things, when you look at some of the intranet in a box solutions, or even if you look at deploying, a tool like SharePoint by itself out of the box, what you're actually buying and deploying is really a page management system. And the problem that exists with a page management system is your management and interaction with content and the actual page it's getting delivered on are one and the same. When you look at the Akuma platform, or any EXP that's worth its weight, you're talking about a sort of an abstraction between your management interface and the front end experience that gets consumed. And so for our perspective, one of the most important things across all Akuma customers is that you're actually able to break that IT bottleneck. You're actually able to empower business users, whether they're in marketing or in communications or in HR, or they are sort of named department heads, to take control of their pages, their collaboration spaces, their content, their calendars, their videos, and do it in a fashion that is quite literally as easy to operate as it is for them to simply hit tasks and functions on their smartphone. So from our perspective, the separation of content from presentation, the separation of the management experience from the consumptive experience is critical in that sense. And we'd be glad to walk you through how that works and how those experiences are separated to empower your users to do their jobs by themselves in a decentralized format versus being locked in sort of the ever-present problem of IT needing to own everything.
Thank you, David, and thank you, John, for the question. The next question is, it might actually elicit a similar answer, but it's from Elisa in the audience. She wants to know, how do you manage governance and who actually sees what in the solution?
Yeah, so you heard me. If I didn't say personalization 30 times throughout this 30 minutes, I'd be shocked. But for us, the critical path to delivering against that North Star vision is a very personalized, targeted, and segmented experience. And really putting each of those employees in a position where they feel like the experience has been built for them. And we do that through the lens of understanding lots of attribution about that user, who they are, where they sit, what language they speak, what department they're in. It goes on and on. And what we see more often across these enterprise customers is there's lots of, I guess, what I would call business-based attribution inside of, for example, Active Directory. But then there's lots of personal attribution about that user that might exist in a Workday or in an Oracle Fusion or a PeopleSoft. And so how do you take the different attributes about that user and bring them together so that I can deliver a personalized experience so that every user is seeing exactly what's designed for them and none of what's not? It's a critical path for us in delivering the right personalized experience. And quite honestly, when you look across some of our enterprise customers, there are some organizations that quite literally get down to individual employees having very personalized experiences. This isn't necessarily segmenting 10,000 employees at a time into a grouping. It might be segmenting 2 employees at a time into a grouping. And understanding how you do that underneath your governance rules and your identity rules is critical to ensure that the right user is getting access to the right content and not the wrong content all the time.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Lisa, for the question. Next question is from Rodrigo in the audience. He wants to know, it's actually a 2-parter, so just to be respectful of everyone's time, this will be our last question. So the first part of the question is, does Akuma store data? And the second part of it is, each department has its own tools. Do you build custom integrations for customers, or do you have any built-in ones?
Yeah, Rodrigo, really good question. So a couple of things. One, point blank, We do not store any data. It is our, if there was a secret sauce or a magic bean in the platform, that's it. It's our #1 differentiator over everyone else in the market. We do not store any of your data. To the second part of your question, what you're really describing there is a question around, is this a product or a platform? And it's a phenomenal question. I would argue that platforms are exciting because they deliver lots of things out of the box, allow you to get up and running quickly, and put you in a position where you can take use of the things that it gives you and not be restricted in the sense of your time to value. The problem with a product is that it tends to have fairly rigid sort of fences around it. And so while it works well for what it works well for, if you want to customize it or configure it or go off the guardrails, it tends to fall apart because it's not designed for that. That's where you really look at a platform. And I often describe a platform as like a big ball of clay. And a ball of clay is exciting because I can manipulate that and morph that into any shape I want. The problem is it starts as just a big ball of clay. So I'm not able to get up and running as quickly as I want. I'm not able to take advantage of reusable components because I don't have any of that, because I'm starting from the concept of a platform. I would tell you that by design, Akuma sits right in the middle of a product and a platform. We deliver over 200 apps and widgets, our terminology, out of the box that you can use, you can modify, you can configure, or you can customize and expand as a part of your workplace experience initiative. But we also deliver a robust API layer with different SDKs so that when you want to grab that ball of clay because you want to integrate with a proprietary system on the back end, or tie into some legacy tool that isn't sort of a ubiquitous available tool out in the market, you have the ability to do so. So for us, it's sort of bridging the gap and touching the combination, as I had on that slide that almost had the bell curve, which is how do we get you up and running quickly to get to your initial table stakes that are critical for success factors out of the gate, but then also understand that that is not what is going to dictate the experience you deliver for your employees. That is the broader North Star vision and the ability for us to configure, customize, and transform the experience over time to meet the needs of every one of your employees.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Rodrigo, for that last question. Thank you to all the attendees who participated today. Thank you, Dave, for your presentation. As a reminder, the webinar will be available in our resources section within 24 hours. We will be emailing it out to all registrants. For those of you folks who indicated you wanted some additional follow-up, we'll have someone reach out to you later today or tomorrow morning. Again, thank you, everyone, and keep an eye out for some of our upcoming webinars in our resources section. Thank you, and goodbye.